Hi friends, welcome back to my channel, or hello if you are new. Today's video is a little bit different than my typical video that I usually post here on my channel, but this has been in the works for a really long time. So today, my husband Taylor and I are going to share our adoption story of our sweet baby girl. We are going to start from the very beginning and tell you guys about how God moved in our lives and the miracles that He worked. This is probably going to end up being lengthy. We're going to explain the timeline of things, like our infertility journey, all the way up into the adoption and how God brought us here. But this is going to be our view of this story. This will not be Breland's side of the story. That is for her. So we're just going to be sharing how God moved in our lives specifically. So I hope this encourages you if you are in the trenches of infertility or maybe thinking about adoption, or if you just want to hear how God is faithful and moves. Hopefully this blesses you. So this is Taylor. Like I said, you guys have seen him a little bit in my videos before as we built this house, and I don't know, we've done like one Q&A together, but that was
a long time ago.
Years ago. Not typically in my videos, but I wanted to bring him on because obviously this is so personal to us, and that's why we put it off for so long. But we both are going to share pieces of the story. God worked in both of us individually and together. That's what we're going to be sharing. So when we started our family, we got married, and right away we knew we wanted kids. That's something that we had always dreamt of. We were ready to start our family, so we started trying right away. And shortly after we got married, we got pregnant with our son Brooks, and he's now 6.5 years old. He turned 2 years old. We decided we were ready for another baby. We very much so felt like we got pregnant with him so easy. We didn't expect to walk down the long road of struggling to get pregnant like we did. But whenever he was 2, I think it was right around his birthday, we started trying intentionally, like every month, tracking. And we realized very quickly that my body was just so out of whack. And it just made it really hard to even get to ovulation, let alone a positive pregnancy test. And then we got discouraged and just kind of decided to stop tracking for a little bit and just seeing if it would happen. If you've been there and you know the stress of tracking and trying, it's a lot. And we wanted it so badly, but it just wasn't happening. And we just thought, God, why? Like, what is your plan in this? And it didn't make sense at the time.
We just never expected to have the issues because it was so easy with Brooks, and everything happened so fast that we just assumed that next time that we decided we were going to try, that it would just happen right away.
We thought it was in our control.
Yeah, we really did.
It was easy for us the first time, so we just expected that the second time, and it just was very far from that.
This idea that you have in your head of your family and how things are going to work and the progression that your family is going to have, and we thought that we had this plan that this is how it's going to go, and then we were so wrong. It became very discouraging over the years, and that just compounds over time. The longer it goes, the deeper the struggle got.
We were praying for another baby, but at the same time, Brooke started praying every single night before bed. He always would say his prayers, and he started adding, and God, please give us a brother, sister, and a baby. And that's just what he prayed every single night for literal years. He never missed a night where he didn't pray for that. And so fast forward, we hit 2020. That was a really odd year. And in that time, we started looking for a new church. And we had been at the same church for years and years. Since before we had been married. Taylor's dad preached at a church, and that's just where we went. And at 2020, things kind of shifted, and we found ourselves looking for a new church. So we tried out a few different places in our area and finally landed on one. And I feel like that's the first step of God leading us in the right direction. towards what he had for us, but we had no idea at the time. We were just asking him, where do you want us to go? And he put that on our heart, and we met so many people that led us to our adoption.
That experience for our family, and you know, we're still there.
It's pivotal.
Yeah, a pivotal shift in our family and in our faith and how we've grown.
And so we got plugged into a connect group with our pastor and his wife. We had been there for probably 6 months or so, and really got to know people and them and their hearts, and it was just so good. And I remember one night after connect group, our pastor and his wife asked if they would pray with us, or if they could pray with us. And they knew we had been struggling trying to get pregnant, but we never really said anything to them. They just felt led to pray for us. And they did. There was something about that moment for us that just made it feel like less alone. And we felt like we had people contending with us. I don't even know how to explain it, but that was just such a sweet moment for us. And I know it's just a simple prayer, but it wasn't. It was more than that.
It's the first moment too, along the way, that God uses so many people that we really didn't have relationships with. People that we went to church with and people that we knew, but it was just a, hey, how you doing kind of relationship.
And our church is really big too.
Yeah.
Bigger than any church we've attended before.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get to know people in a big church like that. So having those smaller groups and truly connecting and them knowing you, I feel like is huge. So fast forward a few years, spring of 2022-ish, say it's a rough timeline, but that's when we were like, okay, we've got to get some help in this. Obviously, I am not ovulating on my own. My cycles were all over the place and hit and miss. There were clear signs that something was going on with my body. We wanted to get checked out. So I had talked to a girl at church, and she recommended a fertility specialist that she had went to, and we made an appointment with them. Kind of sat on it for a little while, but during that time, we just wrestled with that so much. I really did not want to go. I think I was scared of what they might say, honestly. I was scared to go down that long road. During that time, I had, for some reason, felt adoption laid on my heart. And I remember it just kind of was a thought at first, where I wonder, is this what you have in store? How is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? And we just wrestled with the doubt and the unknown and the fear of what may or may not come with all of it. And I just prayed, Lord, if you want us to go down this road, make it crystal clear. And if you don't want us on this road, at any point, close the door. When adoption started coming in, it just kind of threw me off. And I remember looking it up to see how much adoption cost, where you would adopt, but it just didn't seem, we were building a house at the time, this house that we're in, and I just thought the timing wasn't right, and none of it made sense. But as we kept getting closer to that appointment, I could not shake it. I could not get adoption off of my mind. I hadn't said a word to Taylor about it, because here we were waiting to go to this fertility specialist. I just sat on it and kind of thought, is this just my mind going crazy, or is God prompting me towards something? I brought it up to you. We were living out in our apartment at the time while we were building this house, so us seeing each other wasn't very often, because he was building this house every single night. Him and my dad were out here working after they got off of work. So I just stuck in a few moments and was like, listen, I know we're about to go to this appointment, and I know this is what we're thinking, but for some reason I keep thinking about adopting, and I don't know why. You were like, I have too.
Yeah.
And I could not believe it. I think I about fell over.
God planted it in my head, and I would just have these thoughts of, knowing that we wanted to grow our family and know that we wanted a sibling for Brooks. Just the idea was just kind of a reoccurring thing anytime that I would think about our family and growth and be in prayer about having a baby, and conceiving a baby. But there would always just be this thought of what about adoption?
Yeah.
And kind of the same thing, like had no idea how any of it worked, like who do you talk to?
It was a moment of surrender to any plan or desire, honestly, that we had. Anything we had tried had not worked. And so we were like, Lord, obviously this isn't what you were thinking, so we just want to go on board with whatever you're thinking. And I remember we prayed together outside of the apartment, and it's just one of those moments with God where you're just completely stripped down and you just lay it all at his feet and ask him to move. We did, and I remember you praying like, Lord, we just want a baby. Like, however you want to do that, like, we are open to it. I felt more peace after that than I had in a really long time. So we started going to the fertility specialist and got like blood work done and like just the like basic consultation, and I had gotten some scans done to see if there was anything going on, and
I got tests done.
Taylor got tests done. Like we did, I don't know, a couple months worth of like going every other week or so, and then just trying to rule out anything it could possibly be. Came back pretty clear, except for he did suspect that I had PCOS, but he said it was really hard to diagnose. So we had that in our not so great corner. We decided to move forward. We would start out with treatments to help me, one, start a cycle, and then two, ovulate. I really did feel so much peace going there, and I felt so hopeful at what was to come, and I felt like God was truly working. I knew he was working. I just didn't know what it looked like, but I knew he would either close the door or open the door. During that time, my sister-in-law and I and a friend were going to a conference. It was Sadie Robertson's LO conference. It was her second one she had ever held. And so we traveled down to Louisiana for a weekend, and during that time of being at the conference, it's the first time I had really told anyone how I was really doing with the struggle of it. And I just remember breaking down to my sister-in-law, Allie, and telling her like truly how I was doing and how I felt and what we had been going through, and how I had felt like adoption was on my mind, but we were gonna do the infertility specialist and see kind of where that led us. I just asked her to be praying for me, and she prayed for me that very first night of the conference, and I just felt just weights lifted off of me, and years of just unknown, and again, I just wasn't alone in that moment, and it was huge. It was huge for me. I feel like God worked in me during that time at that conference so much to just trust him, to surrender and just trust him. I knew like that's all I had to do. I didn't have to try, I didn't have to worry, I didn't have to push, I didn't have to do anything, but just be still and just let him work. And so we came home, and I remember I was just so ready. I was so ready. I felt God working. I knew something was happening, but I just couldn't pinpoint it. The very next Sunday at church, my brother and sister-in-law Allie went up to the altar with us after the service, and we prayed together, just covered us in prayer, contended for another child and for God to grow our family, however that looked like, and just his will be done. I remember just sobbing, and just it felt so good to just know that people were praying for us and with us. And during that time of us praying, another lady had came up, and several others from the church had came up and, laid hands on us and prayed. And I remember hearing someone say, like behind me, "It's on the way." And then after we were done praying, this lady that I kind of knew but didn't really know at the time, she had felt the Lord tell her to tell us when we went up there that it's on the way. And she had absolutely no idea of our background. She had no idea that we were even trying. She had no idea. And I just remember feeling so much peace and comfort from that, and like I held on to that.
The thing about her telling us that it's on the way it all, in our minds, it tied back to the fertility specialists and the treatments that we were getting ready to start. In our own minds, having our own plan and thinking like, okay, well, this is what this means. And that, okay, we're going to go through these rounds of treatment with the specialists and they're going to be successful. And it gave us a lot of hope, that was going to be, the end of the waiting, all the years of waiting that we had done. And again, God he had something else. And at the time we had no idea what it was.
And we started our treatment, I would say a few weeks after that. God was just preparing us. We just didn't realize it yet. As we're going and I start the treatment, we had a successful cycle, which was it was uncommon for us. The medication to actually work on time when it was supposed to. I took the medication to help me ovulate, and we were praying for that to be successful. But during that time, I still could not shake adoption off of my mind. And there was one time in particular where we were in the apartment, and I remember I was taking a shower and I had worship music on and was just praying, and I felt so strongly in that moment that we were going to adopt. I was so confident in that I came out of the shower and I told Taylor, I was like, listen, I know that we're going to adopt. I feel like the Lord has said you are going to adopt, but I don't know when that's going to happen. And I remember you laughing at me and we're like, okay, Kailyn. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, I don't know. I cannot pinpoint it, but I just feel like the Lord is saying like, you are going to adopt. I said, I don't know if this will be years down the road. I don't know when this will be. Maybe this will be after this. I'm thinking, oh, we're going to have success with this. And I was so excited. I was so hopeful for the first time in years. Like God was moving in huge ways. I never felt the Lord really say anything like that. I never felt it so strongly where it was a confidence that like I can't even explain. So the next day I had coffee with Allie, my sister-in-law, and we had met up and I told her, where we were at with everything and the medication and stuff. And I said, but Allie, last night, I am telling you, I feel like the Lord said, you are going to adopt. And I said, I know that sounds crazy. And I remember us just both being like, oh my gosh, like that is crazy. The very next day was the day I was supposed to ovulate. And I was so hopeful and so excited and just so ready to test and just see if it was positive. And so while all this is going on, we're still in the thick of building our house. And I just remember the closer we got to moving in and like seeing the walls go up, and I had wrote scripture on specific walls in our home, like in our bedroom. I had specific scriptures that I wanted to write on the post of the wall, the inside of the walls before we put our sheetrock up, and in our dining room and in Brooks's room. And then it was always like have this other room that doesn't have any plans really. And I remember there would be times where I would just go in and cry and it would just be so sad. And I remember there was also days where I was like, Lord, fill this room with, lots of kids and babies, and I just would pray over that room that several times that he would bring life into it. I don't know, the closer we got, just the heaviness that room felt to me for some reason. And every time I would like walk in, it just was like, just was piercing to the heart. The day came where I was supposed to ovulate the very next day after Allie and I had met for coffee. And I was so excited to take that test and to hopefully see a positive and for things to just start happening. And I knew we were about to move into the house, and I was just so hopeful that it would happen this time. We had gotten up, and of course we were like a month out from moving into our home, so it was like go time. We were installing cabinets. You and Dad were in the house, the new house, installing cabinets and doing stuff. And so Mom and I took Brooks and we went to some antique stores. I was looking for a few finishing things for the house. While we were out, I got a phone call from a lady from church, and I knew her, and I think she had my number possibly from being in the design team at the church, just something that I had joined. We had joined a few years ago whenever we started going to the church. And I didn't know her real well, but she was like, hey, call me when you have a chance. And so I wasn't that busy. We were just walking through the antique store, so I called her. And she was like, I know this is going to sound absolutely crazy, and you don't have to say anything, that there was a lady about to have a baby, and she was due any day, and she was looking for a family to adopt her little baby girl. And she was just asking around basically if anyone would be willing to adopt her. And through several people and obedience to the Lord, that phone call ended up to us. And she was like, you're probably gonna think that I'm crazy. And I was like, I do not think you're crazy. Believe it or not, this doesn't really surprise me. I said, this makes sense. We've had adoption on our hearts for months now. Let me call Taylor and I will call you back. Walked out of the building and I was sobbing. I was laughing. I could not believe that was happening. It's almost like I felt the Lord doing it, but then it happened and it just was so surreal, truly. I call you and you could not believe it. I said, I'm coming home. We're gonna pray about this right now. And came home immediately. And I remember we went on the back porch and just prayed, and we were like, oh my gosh, God, what?
It can't be stated enough the timing of that. The fact that that was the day, that was the ovulation
yes,
day.
That was ovulation day. And
like
the crazy
first
part
one.
is, I got a positive ovulation that day. That morning, before I went, I got the positive ovulation. And I thought, this is it.
And that was the thing that we had been looking for
yes.
for so long.
Yeah.
All the years, like this positive ovulation test. God just said, no,
yeah.
that's not it.
That's not it. Insert a baby.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh my gosh. And we were like, she's due any day.
I mean, you couldn't write a story that had timing that worked out the way that did,
yeah.
and the connections of people that got that phone call to us.
Yeah.
We were just in awe.
It even tied back to the lady who had spoken, it's on the way. She was tied into them calling us too.
Yeah.
I mean, crazy. You can't make it up. God had his hand all over it.
Prayed and we said, okay, we're gonna lean into this and we're gonna put everything that we have into it. You know, after we prayed, and again, I called our pastor, I called TW, and I said, hey, we just got this phone call. At this point, we have no details. We don't know anything other than
any day.
Yeah, any day.
And she's willing.
Yeah.
We called her back and we were like, yes, 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 yes. Like, this doesn't surprise us. We feel like God has been preparing this for us. Like, we are willing to do whatever. Like Taylor said, we were all in. And so while we were on the back porch, we did call a couple that we knew from church, and they had adopted before, and they also knew the lady that had called us very well. So we were all trying to figure out like what we needed to do to make this possible. Talk to them, and she had so much knowledge on who to call, what agency could potentially help us, how to get a home screening really quick, just all an abundance of knowledge that was such a blessing. And really, they were like, we will be in this with you. We were praying for you. We are walking hand in hand with you. Both of them, both ladies and families were like, you are not doing this alone. And I'm so thankful. It wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have had them locking arms with us and fighting and contending and praying and hoping and seeking out like any morsel of knowledge we could to try to make this a success, because it was such an unusual situation. I'd never heard of anybody. I didn't know anyone that had done anything like this. We were like, Lord, whatever you want to do. Like, you're gonna have to move mountains if you want this to happen. And I remember so many phone calls felt like a dead end, and we would find out information or something would come up, or it was just a battle for the next 13 days.
Hardest days that I've ever been through.
From the time we got the phone call to the time she was born was 13 days. In that time, we looked for lawyers to back us and to work with us. I think we went through 7. We called 7 different lawyers.
I was in contact with 7 different ones. We didn't know what our timeline was.
We didn't know if it was a day.
And so
we didn't know if it was 2 weeks.
We
had no idea.
We really had no idea. And we have a few contacts. Basically, we were just anyone that we thought could give us information on how we needed to do this, we were going to give them a call. And in the meantime, I am spending my nights Googling,
searching frantically,
like state adoption laws and like reading through them as much as I can, and what do we need.
And these other ladies were doing the same too. They were bloodhounds
trying
to get information.
A recommendation on some family law practices, and so I start making phone calls, and I had no experience dealing with attorneys at all. And so when you call and you're probably talking to either a secretary or a paralegal and you're not talking to an actual attorney, and you kind of give a overview of, hey, this is the situation, and then you just have to wait for a call back essentially, or an email back.
It's usually like days later.
Yeah, and
for
it's
an appointment weeks later.
Right.
It doesn't move fast.
Either weren't familiar enough with that type of law to help, or they just didn't have time. They had other cases and other situations. Talked to 7, and then it ended up being the 8th one that we finally were able to work with. Talk to someone on the phone, you wait for a call back, you wait for an email back, it could be the next day, and during all this time we were just in the dark on how long it was going to take.
We were so nervous that she was going to go into labor and have this baby girl, and we would have nothing legally to back us, and it was terrifying. But I knew the Lord obviously had brought us this far. I knew He brought us this far, and we just trusted that, like, in all of this, He had a plan. We finally got in contact with an attorney.
How that came about is
wild.
another miracle.
It's just miracle after miracle. We had an appointment with her. She was like, yes. I think she had one other case where this was kind of similar, and she was confident in it, and we were like, okay, great, get us in. And so she got us an appointment for the following week, at the beginning of the week, and we were like, oh, okay, she could go into labor this weekend, but like, we'll take it.
We had no other options.
We'll take it because no one else would. Luckily enough, the 2 ladies that were helping us with all of this from church ran into that attorney at a coffee shop and started talking to her about it, and which they were kind of like, should we say anything to her, should we not? And they decided just to say it, and she said, tell them to come in tomorrow afternoon.
That was Wednesday that they saw her.
They saw her.
And the 2, they were meeting, it was completely unrelated to
what we were doing, too. It just, God put them together
They were just
at the same
there
place.
getting coffee, appointment with for the following Monday, and this is on Wednesday.
And so she says, tell them to come in tomorrow afternoon. So that was Thursday afternoon. We were like, oh, yes. Like, you can breathe a little bit more. So we went in that following afternoon. You took off work so we could go in and talk to her. And we were like, what do we need to do? She was amazing. She was so sweet and confident and wanting to help. Everyone was willing to help. But she was like, let's do this.
Yeah, like
I know what to do.
Yeah, that was the first time we got the vibe of we can make this
happen. We're able to get some paperwork from her where we could get temporary guardianship once she was born. We got everything lined out with our attorney, so we were able to call her if it happened that weekend.
There was some real spiritual warfare going on, and it's like
it didn't go without a fight. For sure.
Like a conversation in particular that was probably a couple days after we had initially said yes. We didn't know the type of care that Breland had received up to that point.
Prenatal care.
And all we knew and all we were aware that was known by anyone was that she was a girl. Did the possibility of complications
change our mind?
Change anything for us? And we're talking on speakerphone to this couple that was helping us and was kind of the mediator for us.
Just wanted to keep everything very transparent.
Yeah, and your immediate response was no. Like it changes nothing for us. And that was something that we hadn't even thought of. The immediate response of no, like we're in this no matter what. And we're going to continue to press into this, and we're going to leave it up to God. And we're going to trust that He's brought us to this point. Ultimately, it's in His control.
Every time we felt like a door was closing on it and we thought, well, this isn't going to happen, or something would come up, and it was every day, like several times a day, like things would happen and we're like, okay, this isn't going to work out. And then He would pull through and we're like, oh my gosh. Yeah. It was just a true roller coaster every single hour. And 13 days felt a lot longer than what it actually was. So we had met with the attorney that Thursday night, and then the next day, Friday morning at like 6 a.m., I got a phone call and it was time to go to the hospital. And we were fortunate enough to be able to be there. Okay, the battery died. So we are using my phone now. So the audio and video might look a little bit different. Anyways, we got the phone call literally Friday morning, the day after we had met with our attorney and gotten the paperwork for the temporary guardianship so we could even have something to stand on legally to make medical decisions for Breland while we're at the hospital, for us to even stay at the hospital. And so we got to the hospital and we were able to be there all day and wait for her arrival. I was fortunate enough to get to go back there and be with Breland from the moment she was born. And that's something that is such a sweet gift. And before she was born, we were made aware of some things that would probably be a concern from the doctors with Breland in regards to her health. And we had a lot come at us very quickly while we were there. Just praying for her to be healthy, to be strong. And like the moment like we saw her and held her, she was healthy. She came out and everything that they had predicted would be a complication for her, absolutely, there was nothing wrong with her.
And the nurses were unbelievable.
Yeah, they were amazing. And it was just so sweet, and as like trying and as unknown of a situation that it was, like it was so beautiful and so seamless, and like you just felt the Lord's hand over all of it. Even like after she was born and papers were signed, they put us in our own room with her, and we were her mom and dad. She never faced any sort of trial medically. Like everything they looked for, nothing. And you can't explain that again other than just God's mercy and His grace and just the love that He showed her. And then we brought her home to our apartment. One bedroom that we all slept in because we were literally about to move into our home that we had built, and we had a room for her, the room that we had been praying in. But we brought her home to the apartment. Quickly got the house finished. This is what God had for us, and there's nothing like it. There's nothing like experience His goodness, His faithfulness in such a real way. We finally did move in a few weeks later, or a month later probably.
Documentation that we had that gave us temporary guardianship and allowed us to make decisions at the hospital, that was sufficient for the hospital, those days that we were there. But
for us to leave with her.
Yeah, and for us to go home with us. We'd been given temporary guardianship, had to get documentation, had the signature of a judge. Paperwork in the state of Illinois, termination of rights that cannot be done until 72 hours later, post-birth. So there was another window of kind of, this super exciting time and, absolute joy, that she was with us. But we weren't exactly like through everything yet.
No,
we were still a lot of questions.
Still a lot of unknowns. We finally did get a judge and a court date, and our attorney fought for that the whole way through. Got our like legally guardianship, not temporary, but legal guardianship. And then from there, we had to have several other court dates before we could actually legally get custody.
So making stuff happen, and every time that we thought there was going to be a hurdle, like there just wasn't. And all of these ideas and anxieties that we built up in ourselves, and wondering what was going to happen, and the unknown, and it was just, and through it all, God just told us to be still and know that He was going to handle it, and that's really been the theme of all of it from the beginning.
So much peace, and like every court date that we had, it just was more confirmation. And then we finally, so she was born in October, and then the following May, after getting delayed a few times, we officially got to go into court and legally adopt her. And that was a super special day. And everything was finalized at that point. So she was 7 months old at the time. And from what we've heard, in most adoptions, it usually takes longer than that. So we were very fortunate to be able to everything to be done legally in that amount of time. Other
than, we had to get background checks, federal and state, and, a few things here and there. But God He just worked it all out.
So that is our adoption story. That is how Breland came into our lives, and the miracle after miracle after miracle that God worked to place her into our home and our family. And she is now 15 months old. She just turned 15 months old. And she's walking. She's the sweetest thing. So she is sassy and strong and just the perfect little girl. And we just absolutely adore her.
When we look back on the years of waiting and wondering and month after month of disappointments, and I talked about the stress of the 2 weeks after we got the phone call, through us, and how he grew our faith through that entire situation, and the outlook that we can have now and that I have now is different. I have a faith now that God can and will do anything for His children, and His love and His grace is just so abounding.
And He uses people He uses His church. He used so many people to bring Breland to us, and in ways that He would talk to each specific person, and they had to be obedient in that for all of this to happen, and they did. And the blessing upon blessing upon blessing that brought, and it ended up just the obedience of everyone of his people to bring her into our lives is just, it will never cease to amaze me. He wants to be involved in every step of the way, in every situation in our lives.
I hope that it encourages anyone who's out there who's maybe not even dealing with infertility specifically, but people who are in periods of waiting and people who are in periods of longing, that God sees you. He sees you right where you are. Just hope that someone out there is encouraged by that, and that He sees you and He knows you and He loves you.
And He's always working. Always. Even when you feel like, God, where are you? This doesn't make sense. Because we've been there and we've walked through those trials. Again, like Taylor said, no matter what it is, but He is there and He is working. Through all of this, it just grew our faith so much that the thought of worrying about growing our family just went away. I had such a faith that if the Lord wants to do it, He will do it. Shortly after Breland was born, I got pregnant out of nowhere. On our own, no medication, nothing. And unfortunately, we did end up losing that baby a few months later. And again, it was okay, we're gonna trust You no matter what. And even though that was so hard in a different way. We knew that God could do it, and if he wanted to, he would. And we knew that our children are his children. And then a few months after that, we got pregnant again. And I'm now almost 22 weeks pregnant, and we're having a little girl. and we're due in May. And so it's just crazy how when we think there's no way, we see no way of God bringing anything good out of something, he says, just wait and then watch and see what I can do. Just the sweetest thing to trust him and to know that it's not in our control, and it doesn't have to be in our control, and that he can work all things together for his good, and he does.
One of the things that our pastor talks about is this phrase. He says, "I've seen too much," and what it means is that you've seen God do too much
To not believe. Yeah.
And to not trust him, and to not have faith that his will is best. An indescribable takeaway from everything with Breland losing a baby, the hardships that were associated with both of those things, but it was still, we've seen too much, and we've seen him move and work, and just so full of grace.
Again, this isn't my normal content, but I do feel like it's probably the most important video that I will probably ever post. So I'm excited to finally get it out there. It's definitely been in the works and in our hearts for a long time. And It feels really good to share that with you and to share what the Lord's done. Take care, and I'll see you guys soon in my next video. Bye, friends.